McCarthy, the Associate Laboratory Director for Nuclear Sciences, to introduce our speaker this morning. Kathy.
Thank you, Jim. It's my pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Mr. Jeff Lyash. And I want to please take the time to read his full bio on the website because it's really interesting and we could actually do the whole hour this morning just talking about that. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to cover a few things, but take the time to do that. He is the president and CEO of TVA, and that he has been there since February of 2019. He leads the nation's largest public utility and one of the top producers of electricity in its mission of serving the people of the Tennessee Valley. And there's a whole list of things that he's done, and I just wanted to highlight a couple since coming to TVA. TVA has significantly lowered operating and maintenance costs, improving both productivity and efficiency. And these savings are passed on to customers. And what customers see is lower power costs. 70% of the nation pays more for energy than those that are served by TVA. And of course, that's a really important thing. There's also been quite a bit of charitable related work helping the community, especially during the time of COVID. And there were things like $1 billion of credit support to local power companies, a $4 million community care fund, the Back to Business incentive for local businesses. And in August of 2020, the TVA board approved a $200 million pandemic relief credit. That's a 2.5% reduction for customers during fiscal year 2021. So really impactful things under Jeff's leadership. He did a bunch of things before going to TVA, coming to TVA. He was president and CEO of Ontario Power Generation in Canada. That's actually where I met him when I was working up in Canada as well. He was president of CB&I Power, executive vice president of energy supply for Duke Energy, executive vice president of energy supply for Progress Energy, president and CEO of Progress Energy Florida, senior vice president of Energy Delivery Florida, vice president of transmission, as well as a wide range of management and executive roles in Progress Energy's nuclear program. And again, details are online. He began his career in the US NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, receiving the NRC Meritorious Service Award in 1987. He was honored with the Drexel University Distinguished Alumnus Award in 2009. That's where he received his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. And he held a senior reactor operating license from the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So he's really seen the nuclear field all the way from being in there running the reactors up to overseeing the reactors and more, not just nuclear, but more broadly than that. He golfs, he fly fishes, and he and his wife enjoy cooking, skiing, reading, and charitable work. They have 2 married children and 9 grandchildren. I'm jealous. I just got my first grandchild last month, and the Lyashes do live in Knoxville. So please help me in welcoming Jeff and looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Really great to see you again. And like I say, it's a bit warmer here than, even as it's cold today, than what you and I experienced in Canada, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you for inviting me today. I certainly am honored every time I come here to speak, and also quite an honor to follow Chuck Fleischman, the honorable congressman from the region, who I know did a great job speaking to you at your last meeting. So I want to leave plenty of time for questions. And sort of toward the end of my opening remarks, I'm going to touch on Clinch River and new nuclear. Although I probably am not going to announce anything to you today, I may raise the expectations that there'll be an announcement in the near future. But I'll touch on that. Let me talk about the power business. And you know, like many of you, I've been in this industry for 40 years. And so, you know, I've seen lots of change, lots of potential, but frankly, I've never been more excited about the effect we're going to have on people's lives in the next decade or two than I am right now. You know, this has always been a great industry to be in because it's important. You know, it forms the foundation of your quality of life, your safety, your business. Without electricity, affordable, reliable, plentiful, we couldn't live the lives we're living. As a matter of fact, I was a couple months ago out in Washington meeting with Bill Gates, talking about the Natrium reactor and a number of other things. We meet from time to time. And you probably know this. He spent a lot of time taking a look at poverty around the globe and trying to discern what actions he could take that would most effectively raise people out of poverty. And he found that the thing that correlates most closely with the rise from poverty is availability and cost of electricity. And then when he asked, how do I further that? That's how he got to nuclear and this Natrium reactor. It isn't a nuclear focus. It's a global poverty focus that he has. So it's an important business that we're in. And you know, it's only about 100 years old, which isn't that long. And think about what it's done to the country and to the world. Just incredible. So, you know, at the beginning of the last century, it was manpower, horsepower with real horses, and no electricity. By 1950, 2% of the end use energy that we use, of all the energy, 2% was electricity. And today it's 22% since 1950. And by 2050, almost every study shows it'll be somewhere around 50%. So even if we get more energy efficient and the pie shrinks, the slice of the pie that's going to rely on electricity grows. A little bit more about that challenge in a minute. So TVA, you all know TVA's history, and many of you have heard me say this before, but it was created with three primary missions. Energy, making electricity available across the valley. The environment, restoring, protecting, and leveraging this environment for the benefit of the people who live here. And economic development, drawing durable capital and jobs to the area to raise the quality of life for people who at the time, and to a large extent still, have incomes below the national average and need a help to have a better life. That was our mission in 1933. It is still the mission. That's still exactly what we're focused on. And the reason I'm so excited about this today is those three intersect so tightly today and are so relevant over the next 20 years that I cannot think of an industry that's going to be more impactful. You cannot achieve one of those objectives without achieving all three. Low cost electricity, if it's not environmentally responsible, is a failed path. Low carbon electricity that's too expensive for people to afford is also an unsustainable path. And without low cost, reliable, resilient electricity, low carbon, you can't attract economic development. You know, I was with Bill Ford and Jim Farley as we were trying to recruit Ford Blue Oval City to Western Tennessee, and they both made it really clear. You know, I said, why are you interested in Tennessee? Well, there was a whole set of reasons. You have a mega site, it's a fantastic site. We love your tax structure, it's centrally located in the country, so from a product distribution point of view, we like it. We think we can get a good workforce, lots of reasons. And you know, my question was, what role does TVA play in your reasons? And they were pretty frank. They said, here it is. Your electricity is lower today than 80% of the utilities in the country at retail, and your industrial rates are lower than 95% of the country. But in addition to being low price, so low price is important, it's reliable, most reliable transmission in the country. It's resilient. Resiliency is not reliability. Resiliency is what happens when how you perform when the unexpected happens. How do you perform in a polar vortex? How do you perform when a tornado rips through Kentucky and takes down 102 transmission structures. How do you perform when the price of natural gas doubles and coal triples? That's resiliency. So low cost, high reliability, high resiliency, low carbon, third lowest carbon intensity of any major utility in the country. These are all important. And then, of course, Jim Farley said, Jeff, did we mention low cost? So my point is, energy, the environment, and your positioning on those also drive economic development and bring prosperity to the valley. So that's what we're focused on. So let's think about that future. 22% energy, end-use energy from electricity today, 50% or so in 2050. What are we doing? Well, you know, I said we're lower than 80%, 95% on industrial rates, high reliability, high resiliency. We've got to keep driving that just relentlessly as we see growth and as we incorporate technology. We can't allow new technologies to degrade those things. And they can. We need them to enhance it. Energy. Economic development. Well, as I said, we had our most successful economic development year in the history of TVA last year, not including the Ford $5.8 billion investment. Not including that, most successful economic development year in TVA's history. So we're going to keep focused on that. And our strategy is evolving there. I'll talk about that perhaps another time. So the environment. TVA has reduced our carbon emissions against the 2005 benchmark by 63% as of the end of 2021. That's whether you measure it by mass, total carbon emitted, or by intensity. You know, pounds of carbon per kilowatt hour of electricity. We get into this big debate, people will say, oh, intensity doesn't matter, it's all about mass. Well, no, intensity matters too. If you're going to make a decision whether to substitute electricity for some other energy source, you need to know whether that's a net savings or not, right? And so we focus on both. 63%, we've reduced it by 2021. Well, how did that happen? It happened from a number of things. We of course, are building renewable resources, wind from the Midwest under contract. We have a very large solar development program. We have about 2,500 megawatts of solar, either in service or under construction right now. And we'll build out between 10 and 15,000 megawatts of solar over the next decade or so. So we did that. We've optimized the hydro fleet. We're getting more megawatt hours out of our hydro fleet here than we ever have. And we can incrementally improve that over time. We are leveraging one of the nation's largest energy storage facilities at Raccoon Mountain and optimizing that with the system. We have retired half our coal already, over half of our coal stations already, and we will retire the rest by 2035, plus or minus. But we've retired some coal. We've built some natural gas, simple and combined cycle. But I'll tell you, the underappreciated asset here is our nuclear program. So today, we're making roughly 42% of every kilowatt hour you consume from our nuclear fleet. That is significantly more than we ever have. How do we do that? Well, we actually finished the only new nuclear unit of the 21st century at Watts Bar. And it's in service and producing reliable, low cost, zero carbon energy right now. But we did more than that. We took our nuclear fleet and moved it from what for quite a long period of time has been third and fourth quartile performance. We set a goal that we would be top quartile performance of our nuclear fleet by 2022, best nuclear fleet in the country by 2025. And as of the fourth quarter of 2021, our fleet is top quartile in the industry. That means that the capacity factor has gone up dramatically. We're getting more energy out of that existing fleet. And we upgraded that fleet. We just finished our upgrades at Browns Ferry. So the combination of that performance improvement and the power upgrades is the equivalent of an entire second nuclear unit added to our fleet. So yes, we added gas to replace some of the coal, but the heavy work was done by the nuclear fleet. Today, when I add up nuclear, hydro, and our other renewables, 60% of our fleet emits zero carbon. 60% of the energy is zero carbon. Not only is it zero carbon, it has essentially no fuel cost. So what's happened recently, doubling natural gas price, tripling coal price, the fuel price change to our customers is somewhere between 3 and 5%. Because of the diversity of our fleet and that heavy dose of nuclear. So we're going to build, so what are we going to do going forward? Well, we have to, over the next decade and a half, by 2030, we're executing a plan to have reduced our carbon emissions by 70%. By 2035, we will have reduced them by 80%. Now, that's not an aspiration. You'll hear lots of people talk about aspirations. That's execution, which I like a lot better. We're executing to be 80% less by 2035. We aspire to be zero by 2050. But we're very frank about it. When people say, well, you know, the administration has an objective to be zero from the power sector by 2030. Aren't you misaligned with the administration? I say no. My aspiration is zero by 2050. And if we can accelerate that, I am in support of doing it. But saying you can do a thing when you don't have the line of sight on how you're going to do the thing isn't helping anyone. So we're very transparent. We can deliver 80% reduction by 2035. And in order to accelerate that or extend it, we need technology. And I'll be specific about what technology we need. We need long duration, low cost, flexible storage at a price substantially less than it can be done today. Because energy storage of that scale will help us flatten the load profile. And if we're going to add more than the 10 to 15,000 megawatts of solar we're already adding, we can't add it to the system without destabilizing it unless we have that companion technology. Energy storage. We need low carbon fuels. You might think of hydrogen as this, so that we can use those low carbon fuels to decarbonize difficult sections of the economy to electrify, but so that we can take the flexible gas fleet that we need to maintain reliability and lower the carbon intensity of the fuel that we're inputting. Most gas-fired combustion turbines today are capable of burning 50% hydrogen right now. And most of those suppliers think they can move to much higher percentages of hydrogen if the customer demand is there. So storage, low carbon fuels, carbon capture and use. Because some of these resources, say natural gas, they're so important in reliability, in ramp as the system changes, in voltage and frequency support, that decarbonizing the fuel and capturing and using the carbon on the output are technologies that we need. And I don't know if you read, but we teamed with a company where we just captured flue gas from our John Sevier gas-fired combined cycle plant, and they were able to use it to create carbon nanotubes. So that's capturing the carbon and turning it into a useful product, which, by the way, may be one of the key elements of improving energy density of storage that will solve our storage technology issue. So storage, carbon capture, low carbon fuels, and the fourth is new nuclear technology. Because the challenge is we can get to that 80%, But if we're going to accelerate it, or if we're going to take it that last 20%, we need these technologies. The bigger challenge is, if you're going to increase electricity consumption to electrify the economy, remember that 22% to 50%? You not only have to decarbonize the existing energy system, you have to have ways to generate affordable, reliable, bulk, zero carbon energy to fuel the electrified economy. Those two things combined are the big challenge, and it's why we need all of these technologies. I think we do everyone a disservice when we pick one and say it can all be done with that technology. We can do all renewables. I feel the same way if you said we can do all nuclear. There's a diverse portfolio of assets that are required here. And it's for us to make that happen. So let me get a little more specific about this. Let's say we get to our 80% carbon reduction, which we will. And now we want to get to very low carbon levels for the existing system. It's about 35 terawatt hours of energy a year. And we want to see about a 50% penetration in electric vehicles. And we want this manufacturing industry to reside here. And so we want to electrify the economy by 2050. It's about another 35 terawatt hours. So think of this as 70 terawatt hours. Today we produce about 160. So 40% either changeover or incremental addition. So take that 70 terawatt hours and ask yourself, how are we going to do that? Remember, we've already retired all the coal, optimized the hydro, optimized and extended the life of the existing nuclear fleet, added 10 to 15,000 megawatts of solar to the system. That's all done. What next? Well, let me just for the sake of the argument say, I'm gonna push the I believe button that 50% of that 70 terawatt hours is going to come from another huge solar and wind build out. And that it's going to be backed with energy storage so that it can be integrated. And further, it can be here, or it can be in Arizona with high voltage DC coming here, or Oklahoma for wind. I'm agnostic. Half of the 75 terawatt hours goes to that technology. Now you got the other 35 terawatt hours. And in that 35 terawatt hours, you really need some dispatchable, stable, low fuel risk resource that has all the dimensions you need in a power system. Nuclear. I don't see another resource that can deliver that. So that means, let's say our new nuclear, I'm going to get to SMRs. Let's, for the sake of the math exercise, say that we're going to build a 300 megawatt SMR as our standard. That 35 terawatt hours is about 15 SMRs. Plus or minus. That's what we need. That's where nuclear fits. So when I talk to our team about new nuclear, I start out by saying, if we're only going to build one at Clinch River, I don't want anything to do with it. I got a much bigger problem to solve. Building one reactor does not solve the problem. The reason you build one is so that you can establish a cost, a design, a risk profile, a program, a supply chain, a process, so that you can build 15 over the following 15 years. If that's not the objective, building one is not helpful. That sets a pretty high bar, right? For that first of a kind. But I share that with you because I think the technology is that impactful, and getting this right, where we can make this a program, is the critical thing. So Clinch River, early site permit, first one in the country for SMRs. Milestone setting analysis on emergency planning that makes the emergency planning zone the site boundary. By the way, having a site boundary EPC does not mean that local towns, governments, people should not be involved in the decision-making, path forward, and the operation of these facilities. We have to stay committed to that. The driver just isn't the EPZ because it's not necessary. The driver is it's the right way to make this socially supported and acceptable. So there we stand. So where does this go next? Well, given what I said about the need for the program, there's TVA's in a process. We're evaluating all the technologies that would fit that bill. Now, I'm a believer that, you know, the AP1000s, the large scale light water reactors, they have a place globally, and I'm supportive of them. I think the right thing, largely in the US and certainly for TVA, is to focus on small modular reactors for a number of reasons. I think people think the scale, the 1,200 megawatts gives you a benefit of scale and you can run at lower cost. I'll tell you from my experience, as Bill Wood and I've worked on these, that's a bit of an illusion because you're building something that takes so much capital, takes so long, and is at such a scale beyond what normal industry does every day that you lose all that. The advantage of an SMR is it's at a scale that industry can supply the components. It can be modularly built really in a factory. It can be deployed to the sites in 300 megawatt blocks so that you can follow that load growth curve without overbuilding and growing into it. It can integrate in the transmission system much more effectively, particularly as we retire coal units, which are similarly sized. Now, if you're going to build new nuclear, you're confronted with light water small modular reactors, generation 4 advanced plants like HTGRs or molten salt reactors, and beyond that, fusion. You know, our thinking is all of these are great technologies, but the one that can have the material impact that I described in the 2030s and take the baton from what we're executing now to move on to decarbonizing are light water small modular reactors. Because there is no new technology here. It's based on 50 or 60 years worth of operating experience. There is no licensing challenge. There is no new fuel design or fuel cycle. And so we're focused on light water small modular reactors as the initial deployment at Clinch River and programmatically. We're also engaged in Gen 4 reactors. As a matter of fact, we're partnered with Mike Loffer and the Kairos team and Oak Ridge on a 50 megawatt thermal molten fluoride salt reactor here at Clinch River. And I see those as being deployable in a material way, not first a kind of demonstration, but in a material way in the late 2030s into 2040s, and hopefully we'll develop fusion that will layer in sometime in that time frame. So our view is optimize, extend, and leverage the existing nuclear fleet to drive down carbon, deploy a program of small modular light water reactors in the 2030s that can continue that drive and help electrification, work with Gen 4 suppliers to develop that technology so it can be available for a subsequent wave. That's just our thinking about it. Others don't agree, and I respect their views. So how do we do this? Well, you don't just jump up and build 15 reactors. I think TVA tried that before. It didn't work out so well. So you're going to be very disciplined about this. So as we will move through in the coming weeks and months, the final phases of technology selection, and we'll pick a design that we'll focus on. We are building a very disciplined, gated process tied to the first of a kind, with parallel work going on to prepare the field for subsequent deployments if the first is successful. That gated process will, once we clear the technology selection, will first focus on design and licensing. And in that phase, it will also focus on program construction, building the program, estimate, schedule, risk register, risk mitigation projects and techniques, contracting strategies, workforce development. That first phase is critically important because one of the things we learned from mega projects, not just nuclear projects, is if you go to the field too early to buy and build, you will fail. So the upfront work here is very important. Just as an example in terms of risk mitigation, so you all may be aware that we're partnered with DOE and GE on demonstrating a vertical boring technology. Take a tunnel boring machine, turn it on its head, rather than excavating and engineering backfill up, vertically boring where the containment structure will be and building as you come out. It's the way we do tunnels. So that's an example of a technology that we're partnered to explore. So my point is, here in the very near future, we'll make a technology selection. We will put in place that well-conceived, gated, disciplined process to this. We will ask the board to fund that at gate 1, and then we will carefully proceed. Because it's, a first of a kind project like a Lightwater SMR, or if you're Bill Gates and Chris Levesque and you're doing the Natrium out in Wyoming or Montana, similarly, you are going to be a multiple of the nth of a kind cost, because you're building a technology and an execution model that you can replicate. And so we'll go into that eyes wide open. And while we will proceed with design and licensing, going to the field is another matter that will require support for TVA. It will require support from the federal government, from DOE. Frankly, it'll require support from you, the people in the room. Because we're going to need advocates. We're going to need technology development. We're going to need support with risk reduction techniques. We are going to need funding at the federal and perhaps even the state level to offset the risk and cost of the first of a kind, because it'll benefit the nation. And so that is, I'm going to stop and make sure I leave plenty of time with questions, but our approach, I think, over the past decade has demonstrated that we can reduce carbon emissions without raising price while improving reliability and resiliency with the right diverse portfolio and the right balance. And I think we are set up to continue to do that through the 80% reduction in carbon price. That 80% reduction in carbon price I mentioned, we think we can do that by 2035 or sooner. But as importantly, we think we can do it without raising your price. We think we can do it without adversely impacting reliability. And we think we'll actually be more resilient. But now we have to focus on the unsolved residual of that problem. how do you get to zero, and how do you electrify the economy? And there, it is not a competition between renewables, storage, nuclear, even gas. The challenge is the right mix of assets that delivers the outcome that we're all committed to. So that's our thinking. And if I were you, and you want to keep your eye on potential announcements on further developments here, just a tip for you. One of the things I would do is watch the board meeting in February and beyond. And we might have a few things to say about this as the board deliberates and makes its decisions. Yes, sir.
You spoke a lot about the financial aspect of building an SMR. It seems like there's also maybe a political aspect. This community is very comfortable and knowledgeable with nuclear power, and it's a natural place to start. But frankly, there aren't a lot of communities that are as comfortable with nuclear power as Oak Ridge is. The question is, do you have to disperse these SMRs for in Alabama and for in Kentucky, or can you group them, or does it matter?
Yeah, the answer is probably both, right? So I would not anticipate, and this model will develop over time, but I would not anticipate, 15, if we just use that number for argument's sake, 15 SMRs at 15 different locations, because there is an economy to using a known site and building in sequence, right? If you're in a production operation, what you really want to do is build maybe 4 of these on a site, and you want their in-service dates to be separated by 12 to 18 months so you can move the supply chain and the workforce unit to unit to unit. And as you do that, integrating, let's say 1,200 megawatts into a transmission system over a period of time is quite doable if you pick the right site. So I would expect if you wind up with a program like this, that you have multiple sites, 3, 4 sites, each with 3, 4, 5, 6 units on it.
Yeah.
And that's the way I think
Is that the 6-pack that you hear about?
Yeah, see, NuScale, so for example, NuScale has a 6-pack or a 12-pack, which is about in this range. General Electric has a 300 megawatt single unit, but you might build 4 of those. Holtec, I think, is 160 megawatts. It's another light water SMR. So that's the way the model works. And the advantage of it is if you're building 2 AP1000s, 2,500 megawatts, how many of those are you actually going to build? So you never get to the nth of a kind cost, and you've committed 25 billion. Here with SMRs, you've made them industrial scale. You've lowered the amount of capital you have to deploy to build the first unit. And if you do this correctly and deploy it correctly, you learn the lessons you'll need to learn on the first of a kind. First of a kind is generally 2 to 3 times more expensive than an nth of a kind of anything. And then you immediately deploy those lessons learned into the replication of that.
You mentioned something I've never heard before, that is the high voltage DC transmission of power over extended ranges. And it sounds like it fits right into this concept. What has happened on that makes that powerful?
Yeah, so, this notion's been around for a while. Right now, we're in a phase where TVA is building intermittent renewables here in the valley, right? So, as I said, under our Green Invest program, we have over 2,000 megawatts of solar under construction right now because it's cost effective. It's the most cost effective renewable. It's much more cost effective than trying to buy it somewhere else and import it. Plus, that investment is economic development here in the valley, right? Those are jobs and suppliers that are here. As we build that first 10,000 megawatts, you can think of the first 5,000 megawatts as being pretty much the backstand for that is Raccoon Mountain. We have this huge pump storage facility. That next 2,500 megawatts consumes the inherent capability of this system to backstand. Assets we've already built in, now we're just going to use them. The last 2,500 megawatts takes a modernization of the gas-fired simple cycle fleet to be able to backstand it. Once you get up above 10,000 megawatts, you have an integration problem. I'm going to get to your high voltage DC question. Plus, you get to a point where, you know, a megawatt of solar takes about 10 acres. So you begin to get into a land use issue where that price now begins to go up because you've got a constrained resource. So at that point, if you're going to continue to add renewables, and this is out on the horizon, you need to think about whether there's a way to add them somewhere more favorable and import them. There have been proposals to do this, but just weren't cost effective. But there are high voltage DC technologies now, power conditioning equipment that make it a little more cost competitive to take that intermittent renewable at its source, use high voltage DC with low losses over long, and sink it here. My guess is this kind of thing will probably be developed and built to get power flows going from the southwest to the northeast, MISO and PJM, but TVA could take an off ramp there. And, you know, for us, the issue is if it's cost effective, and from an engineering point of view, it can be integrated into the system reliably, then we would consider that. Right now, the cost of that is just much higher than building the renewables locally. But I'm anticipating there might be a condition out there where that's favorable.
You mentioned TVA has a gated process for selecting new designs. I'm wondering if TVA does have the same program for selecting new energy storage technologies.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I mentioned those 4 technologies, and storage is a significant one. And so Joe Hoagland has a program where we're now, how many storage projects do we have working on the system right now?
We got 1, 2, there are 3 under construction.
Yeah, and about another 5 or 6 behind that are different, you know, lithium ion flow batteries. We're doing some design work on additional pumped hydro, maybe pump back hydro, pump back up the river system. So right now it's a process to test the technologies, learn them, get a sense for the cost structure, understand how they can be integrated into the system. And that's all in our innovation organization that Joe runs. When we get to the point where these are commercially viable and they're out of the development phase into a production phase, then that same type of gated process applies.
Hey Jeff, let's get a question from online
Yeah.
here. We've got one that discussed technology advancement and generation, and after the generation, there are losses in transmission. What challenges do you see in transmission technology, and is TVA also focused on solving those challenges?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of talk about a national transmission grid and building a lot of transmission. It's interesting to me that sits juxtaposed against the other conversation, which is distributed generation and local grids. And it seems to me we really need to work with both. I think there are some large-scale transmission projects in the country that would be helpful at integrating, but I think you can easily put too many eggs in that basket, particularly given natural events, hurricanes, tornadoes, ice, snowstorms. And so there's this balance where you want a diverse portfolio of generating resources locally near the load, and you want to layer in some that maybe come in via substantial transmission, but there's always a balance. You can't seize on one of these as the solution. And so I think the research and the money that's now going into transmission investments and technology is important. And let me give you an example of this. So we're spending about $2 billion over the next few years on the TVA transmission system. Well, what are we doing there? Well, we are going through what's called a regional grid transformation. It is setting up this grid not only the bulk power system, the way we run it, but regionally to be able to integrate distributed energy resources, demand side management, and these technologies that are coming into play. We're building a new system operations center out in Meigs County. This system operations center will be at a completely different level of cybersecurity, physical security. It will be able to withstand an F5 tornado. It creates a black start capability for this system where it sits in our hydro fleet and our nuclear unit, so that if you ever saw a blackout and you watch this from space, maybe the first place on the East Coast you would see lights is Meigs County. Believe it or not. And it is also EMP proof, geomagnetic disturbance and electromagnetic pulse proof. And as part of that investment, we're investing substantially in advanced sensors, AI, pattern recognition, so that we will be able to do real-time rating of transmission equipment and optimize the system and dispatch the fleet. So the transmission investments and improvements I'm focused on are not just high voltage DC, it's applying all the modern technology we have to getting a much more flexible, much more fluid transmission system. And that ops center, it's about a $300 million investment. Once it's in service, will save our customers something on the order of $100 million a year in fuel. That's pretty good payback, I think. Just by more effectively dispatching the system, lowers line losses and et cetera. So hopefully that comes a little bit closer.
Jim, I think I told you the Haywood County Commission and Mayor had given up on the mega site, but said TVA never did. Can you talk a little bit more about the size of that site, what TVA is going to continue to do, and maybe how technologies in Oak Ridge could play into what Ford's doing, and also what you're doing for EV charging stations across the valley?
Yeah, great. I could talk for an hour on this. Of course I won't, but I could. See, we believe electrification is going to be one of the primary ways to cost effectively decarbonize the economy. You heard me say that. And one of the leading applications here is transportation. So if you have an internal combustion engine and you replace it today with an EV, you will save $1,000 a year in fuel costs. Actually, at today's gas prices, you'll probably save $2,000 a year in fuel costs. And you'll reduce your carbon emissions by about 75% at today's carbon intensity. So if we're successful in continuing to drive that down, it only gets better. So this is economically a really viable technology. So from an economic development point of view, a number of years ago, we focused on attracting EV manufacturers and the companies that will supply them and the technologies that will support it. Because as you drive the efficiency of energy storage for an EV, that technology is eventually going to drive out into the transmission and distribution system, right? That same technology for storage. Even if it's not bulk energy storage, it can be voltage support, it can be reliability or resiliency related, lots of dimensions of value. So we've been focused on recruiting EVs, and we've been quite successful, right? Toyota, Mazda, Volkswagen, the GM plant at Spring Hill now, originally made Saturns, will make the Silverado. They have a partnership with LG for their battery plant there. You're right, we didn't give up on the mega site, and I got to tell you, the availability of ready-to-build sites is an important economic development advantage, and so we have to continue to focus here. But we were always confident that mega site was going to find the right company, and the right company turned out to be Ford. And we worked for quite a long time with a lot of partners to land Ford there. This is a $5.8 billion investment in Blue Oval City. And when Jim Farley talks about it, they talk about it as the Rouge plant of the 21st century. The Rouge plant was where Henry Ford made the Model T. And so they're not only going to build the Ford F-150 Lightning there, their objective is to revolutionize the auto manufacturing industry. So this will be like no manufacturing process they've ever run before. And they're going to build a battery plant there as well. And so just huge economic development for the region. But here's the real potential of this. That F-150 and the vehicle that comes beyond it, their objective is to drive this to a 700-mile range. And not only a 700-mile range, but to make that F-150 able to power your job site or power your home for 3 or 4 days if you need it. It's going to be a size energy storage that may actually be beneficial vehicle to grid, and there may be enough excess capacity that we can make that work. There's going to be all sorts of technology that has to be driven in there to make this happen. And if we're successful doing that, all those technologies will then flow out into other industries and out on the power system. And right now, Tennessee is the 3rd largest manufacturer of EVs in the country. And when GM and Ford go into service, it'll be the largest. And these are the jobs of the future. That's what our economic development program is all about. And we're working with Ford in a different way on their energy profile. Their ESG objectives are zero carbon. And so as their energy supplier, we're working with them on a range of technologies that we can deploy that'll help their business be zero carbon. And there's an incremental cost to it, and Ford's willing to make the investment. And so that's where we're at right now. Vehicle charging, TVA was one of the founding members of an electric vehicle coalition that now spreads all the way across the country. That's committed to do what we and the state of Tennessee together committed to do. We have a program called the Fast 50. We're building a high voltage DC charger every 50 miles on all major thoroughfares in Tennessee, so that you can get in your car in Johnson City and know that you can drive to Memphis, and you'll be able to stop for half an hour, get a cup of coffee, and recharge your car from 50 to 80 or 85%. So the first of those is in deployment right now. Joe, when do we expect to have that done? 2025?
Yeah, the
All in?
program is 2025.
Yeah. That'll be a high voltage DC charger every 50 miles. We set a flat wholesale and retail charging rate for all these, where there are no demand charges. You can be confident that when you plug in, you're paying an energy charge that's consistent across the board. So we remove another barrier. We have an EV working group with our local power companies, working with them on how they're going to play in this, which will be local infrastructure, public infrastructure, and infrastructure in your garage. You know, how do we fund the investment? How do we recover the costs? What kind of rates do we set up, et cetera? So this is going to be important because I think Tennessee is going to wind up a leader in this field. Maybe last question, and then I need to let you all go.
Do you care to make a comment about the fuel infrastructure program that would be needed to support the SMR program that you're talking about?
Yeah. So fuel is really important in these technologies. You all know this better than anyone, I think. The light water SMR technologies that exist today largely use the existing fuel manufacturing and design. And so, you know, it's General Electric, Areva, Westinghouse, traditional fuel. I think the continued research and development into that light water reactor fuel to make it more and more robust, more and more accident tolerant is really important and needs to continue. When it comes to the Gen 4 reactors, you know, things like HALEU availability are important, and the country should address them because, you know, while I'm really careful, I don't compete those technologies against light water SMRs. As I said, I think it's a continuum of technologies that's got to carry us for 30, 40, 50 years. And so we need to get out ahead of it. So addressing things like HALEU and fuel designs like TRISO fuel and the like, I think are going to be very important. And the world is moving here too. I was just last week, I was on a call with the Chinese. They just put the Shidao Bay into operation there, the Power Ascension program. This is an HTGR with essentially kind of pebble fuel. And so this is going to keep moving, and it's important that it does.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. What a tremendous impact you're having across the entire valley. Thank you for your time.